Palestinian. But even in 1 year, a lot can happen in Palestine. And you know what happened in Gaza, for example, with these marches in Gaza, in which people were killed as they tried to demonstrate their right to return to their homes and lands.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 30 cable stations from Maine to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org. I'm not going to start off with the Middle East today, but with labor. Comments about the defeat of unions with the Supreme Court Janus decision. It basically said that if there's a union at your workplace, the union can't charge you any kind of fee, even though it's legally required to represent you. It's called freedom, more exactly the freedom to be a freeloader. It's going to mean a lot of people will quit their unions. They'll save a little money, not thinking how weak that'll make their union down the road and what that will mean for pay, working conditions, and benefits. In Wisconsin, since 2011, union membership has dropped practically in half because of two laws. One, a Janus-like law, and the other, a law that actually bans unions from negotiating over anything except the basic rate of pay. I've been in unions over 40 years, and though they have big problems, they are one of the very few sources of power that working people have. The 1% is steadily making unions toothless. Heck with that. We'll start off with some union posters and then a little bit from a construction worker rally of some months ago that we covered. As they say, solidarity forever. The Count Me In rally by New York construction workers who oppose efforts by companies to destroy their unions and start a race to the bottom on wages and safety conditions. We do complain about the top union officials and their devotion to the politicians. When are they going to realize it's a whole new world? And that same week of the bad Janus decision, there was the Supreme Court's decision to uphold the anti-Muslim ban. Seems to us groups ought to get together. Unions, Muslims, gays, blacks, women, all the people who are targets of the white supremacy monster. June 24th was declared a day of international solidarity with the Saudi feminists in Prince Salman's dungeons. Several of us in New Haven held up these signs near the Yale bookstore. To get copies of these posters, just go to the website saudius.org. Speaking of posters, a number of Palestinian groups have come up with a great idea. They've taken photos of all the Palestinians killed by Israelis during the Great March of Return and put them up on a Google Drive. Download the pictures, print them out, and use them in ways to honor the dead and fight for the living. Here, activists drape the photos on a fence in all places in Jerusalem, opposite the Knesset.
I'm here today to express my love for the people of Gaza. I stand in solidarity with the Great March of Return. We remember those that lost their lives trying to return to their homes.
We call upon the whole world to voice their outrage at these massacres and to pressure their own governments to stop the crimes of the occupation.
Go to thestruggle.org for a link to the Google Drive or to mondoweiss.net, the place where we first heard about this. Today, Friday, in Syria, in Daraa province, prayers were all canceled. People are running for their lives. In 1 week, 200,000 people have fled. A new record for Syria. Reports are that when Trump goes to visit Putin, Trump will pat him on the back, give him the green light, bless him for all his murderous work in Syria. In Yemen, this massive crowd protests the Saudi-U.S. plan to invade the Yemeni port city of Hodeidah. Now to the Tree of Life Education Fund's homecoming, and a portion of a talk by Dr. Mazin Qumsiyeh. Qumsiyeh teaches at Bethlehem University on the West Bank and is director of the Palestine Museum of Natural History. He's a well-known activist and a lecturer all over the world.
I want to thank everybody for showing up and for this invitation, and it's inspiring to be here. I am a bit tired because I got up at 5 in the morning and it's been a long trip. It's not just jet lag, because I was also expecting the treatment I got at Washington Dallas Airport as I came to Providence. There we go. Maybe get it smaller or get it closer or something. But anyways, and I also want to thank Liz and Peter for picking me up at the airport and not frisking me. It's been quite a trip, so to speak. But anyways, and I am here for 2 weeks. I was at the National Geographic Explorer Club, and what you mentioned about the photographs, by the way, remind me of the power of the photographs. The National Geographic also has a museum in which I went in, and they have a 3D of the Church of the Sepulchre, and I was actually amazed at the power of technology to take us and put us and actually give us even a more rich experience of the Church of the Sepulchre than going inside the church itself. And I got dizzy just going through and flying over the tomb of Christ and things like that. It's amazing. But also, you know, it's distressing that the National Geographic, on registering for it, they don't have anything about Palestine that I could select from. So I had to put the USA as my country. And it is technically my country also, but coming from Palestine, putting Bethlehem University plus USA sounded weird, that the Institute Bethlehem University is actually in the United States, not in Palestine. So hopefully I can get them to change that and list us as a country, and I'm working with them, and I met the CEO, and hopefully, it's the first time, by the way, they gave a grant to a Palestinian institution, so I don't know. So what I want to talk about today is very briefly what is going on in terms of just some random thoughts, let's put it. First, you know that agriculture developed in Palestine with the Natufian, what we call Natufian agriculture, and the Canaanites were the ones who developed agriculture. And this is a reconstruction of what a Canaanite would look like from a skull of a Canaanite that we do as biologists. And the guy who is up there, I don't know who he is and what his name is, but that's what most Palestinians dark-skinned look like, and that's what Jesus probably also, color of his skin was not white, it was more dark like that. And this is something we have to reflect on. Jesus was born in a country, of course, at the time called Palestine, and his biological blood, if you want, comes from Nazareth, and this skull precisely also comes from the same location. Next. And these are the people of Palestine, the native people of Palestine. My grandfather dressed just like this gentleman, actually. Next. And these people, of course, religions came and became diverse religions in Palestine: Christians, Muslims, Jews, Baha'i, Druze, etc. And these are the people who, of course, today and on the past 130 years have resisted colonial occupation. We didn't resist migration or immigration, by the way. We were the most welcoming people on earth, actually. We welcomed, for example, the Armenians after the Armenian Holocaust, and we even gave them a quarter of our capital, quarter of Jerusalem. It's called the Armenian Quarter. So Palestine has always welcomed immigrants. We have Ethiopians, we have Druze, we have Baha'i, we have people, Moroccans who came and settled and lived with us. So Palestine has always been very welcoming. And even looking at this picture, you can see, for example, the head of the Ethiopian church, this 1932 picture, by the way, is a diverse society, diverse in religions, diverse in cultures, but living in harmony with each other, something that this church has exemplified, by the way, of its inclusiveness. Next. For us, of course, resisting colonialism is also natural, and biologically any situation, any society that is subjected to colonialism will resist colonialism. And for the natives, even resistance is exemplified by existence. Just simply existing on our land, like these girls in Bethlehem going to class, is a form of resistance. Next. Now, resistance is important to be inclusive, and I always emphasize the importance. I was arrested maybe over 15 times in Palestine by the Israeli occupation forces, and many times when I'm arrested with people. My family is Christian, but I'm arrested with Muslims and even with Jewish Israelis. Half the time I was arrested, Israeli Jews were arrested with me. So this is what we call joint struggle because it's a human issue that we all work for. So for example, Ghada Karmi and Ellen Siegel, who got together decade after decade to protest this system of racism and discrimination that exists in our country, exemplify that joint struggle that we have. Now, of course, there is a price to pay for this. And for us Palestinians, the price has been very steep. Some tell us even it's too much to pay and we should give up. But the price continues to be paid, and over 110,000 actually so far have been killed. Over 800,000 have been injured, some with life-debilitating injuries. Over 700,000 Palestinians have been detained or jailed in the struggle for freedom. Next. And since I came here maybe last a few years ago, I forget now, I'm getting Alzheimer's disease, but I don't remember. For some of you, when we spoke maybe last is maybe some of you who came visited us a year ago or something. But even in 1 year, a lot can happen in Palestine. And you know what happened in Gaza, for example, with these marches in Gaza, in which people were killed as they tried to demonstrate their right to return to their homes and lands. And even, a paramedic, Razan Najjar, who was 21 years old, was killed. A baby who was 8 months old was killed with tear gas inhalation. A double amputee who was also shot and killed. Children, press people. Nobody was spared in these demonstrations. It was intentional. Israel wanted to send a very strong message, don't come near the borders. Well, you know, there are 2 million people in Gaza. Most of them are refugees. They can literally see the lands that they were kicked out of across the border. And not only that, they are kept in this open-air prison with no living conditions that are to speak of. I mean, literally, people are starving, not getting medical aid. Many people are dying for lack of medical aid and so forth. So what do you expect them to do, you know? And people kept telling them, decade after decade, don't support Hamas, don't do violence, do peaceful demonstrations. Well, when they start peaceful demonstrations, they were mowed down, you know? 10,000 people were injured. Next. This is, by the way, Basil Laraj, who was killed last year, a friend of mine, from the village of Al-Walaja. Next slide. This is basically the demonstration, and I want you to focus on this picture to understand what's going on here. The demonstrators are not allowed to get within 150 meters of the Israeli positions. So not one Israeli soldier was injured. And even though some demonstrators were using, like David was using, the slingshot, but they were far away for any of these stones to affect anything, and no Israeli soldier was injured or even claimed injury, as sometimes happened. They claimed something that didn't happen, because they were just simply too far away. And yet, of course, high-powered rifles can reach 500 meters or a kilometer away. So it's very easy to pick people and shoot them, and that's what they did. And not only that, of course, Israel has been attacking Gaza, as somebody else mentioned, and using it as a kind of laboratory for testing weapons that they then sell to India and other countries, and say, here's battle tested. Of course, not battle, but it's massacring Palestinians by bombing them with these advanced weapons. And Israel has used these advanced weapons and ended up destroying much of Gaza as, and ironically, one of the people there is an artist. That's what he did with the remnants of his home in appreciation of our tax money that supports all of this. Next. Israel is also using banned weapons. For example, these what they call butterfly bullets that expand and basically shatter limbs. And hundreds of Palestinians have lost limbs as a result of this. And by the way, the medical treatments in Gaza are horrible. There's not even, I mean, I've seen pictures. I didn't want to show you some of the pictures of what happened. I mean, the drawing there is an illustration. But the pictures show that there's not even caring for this, because there's no medical facilities. There's no artificial limb, for example, available in Gaza. So most of the people who lost limbs, they have to literally limb, as you see here. Next. At the same time, Israel was doing this, of course. Mr. Kushner and his wife Ivanka were opening the so-called American embassy in Jerusalem. So some guy with Photoshop did this on it. But this is almost unbelievable. It's almost like we couldn't believe it that they were actually opening an Israeli embassy in Jerusalem on stolen Palestinian land while Israel was massacring people just 20 miles away. It was just incredible for us. And Palestinians, I can tell you, we Palestinians, historically, Edward Said actually said it in one of his books. He said it's amazing that Palestinians could distinguish between actions of governments and people. So there's no Palestinians who generalize about Jews, for example. Maybe there is a few, tiny. But most Palestinians distinguish. There is Zionism and there's Israel and what it does, and there's Jews and Judaism. It's two different things. Most of us recognize that. Most Palestinians also recognize there's the American government and Trump and all this stuff, and there's the American people and what they are. And you would be amazed. I mean, there are Americans I have in the museum. I get American volunteers all the time, spend 2 or 3 months and sometimes 6 or 8 months with us. And they go around, everywhere in the West Bank at night. Nobody ever, and they say, we are Americans, and they're welcome. But for us, it's still an issue. How do we distinguish? What is this? Why is the U.S. government putting its weight behind the genocidal regime? I'm sorry to use such terminology, but it is genocide what's happening in Gaza. Next. Now, as we speak, many of my friends are in jail, including, of course, Ahad Tamimi, who, like Stan and others have met when they came to Palestine, the Tamimi family. She is in jail, her mother is in jail, her cousin is in jail, her brother is in jail. The whole family is basically in jail. And it's for nonviolent resistance, basically. Her mother, by the way, is charged with simply videotaping and posting things on Facebook that the Israeli government considered inciting to resistance. And the girl, Ahd, was 9 years old when she started resisting, and now she's in jail. She's 17 years old, and she just took her high school exam in jail, basically. Ahd is charged with slapping a soldier. And yes, she did slap the soldier. There's a videotape of that. But this soldier and his company were shooting at Palestinian children and have just the day before shot her cousin, and the bullet came through his head and shattered his skull, basically. And she didn't want him to shoot at other children from her front yard. Next. Now, other things that have been happening in Palestine is this week there is demonstrations now not against the Israelis or Israeli government, but against the Palestinian Authority. And this is from a demonstration in Ramallah, and I kind of regret that I'm in the US and I'm not in this demonstration. I'm sure if I am, I would be with the 32 other friends of mine who are now in Palestinian jails, not in Israeli jails, for protesting the Palestinian Authority complicity in the genocide in Gaza. Next. And when they arrested friends of mine, like this guy here, the gentlemen who arrested him were dressed actually in civilian clothes, but they are known to us. We identified them as Palestinian Security Services people. You can see them there in the pictures. Next. We take solace, of course, in the international solidarity with us, with the Palestinian cause that's happening around the world. And the solidarity with Gaza today is, I venture to say, higher than any time previously in our history of Gaza. Siege, basically, which started intensifying in 2006. Next. And in Jordan, there is demonstrations for Palestine, but also demonstrations against the economic stresses in Jordan that are caused largely by Jordan obeying its Israeli and American masters, including the $15 billion additional debt that Jordan incurred when they started building this Red Sea, Dead Sea canal. The church here, by the way, has an environmental justice committee and group that works. I noticed on the board, and in the past I worked with them on some issues. Environmental issues are very, very important for us, and globally we need to think about that. Next. And the last thing that happened 2 days ago, there were demonstrations in Afula, and it's a Palestinian city that was ethnically cleansed of its native population in 1948 and now made all Jewish immigrants, Jewish settlers. Afula became all Jewish, and now there was one case where a Palestinian-Israeli family wanted to buy a house, and they convinced a guy to sell them the house. And before they moved in, hundreds of Jewish residents of Afula rose up and said, no, you cannot actually have Palestinians live in Afula because Afula is now a Jewish city. And so it reminds us of wanting white tenants for a white community. Next. The Palestinian Authority continues to repress us and arrest our friends. This is during a demonstration we had when they arrested Isa Amro from Hebron, where we stood in front of the Palestinian court. At the time, we were successful, actually, in getting the judge to release him, but he's still harassed. Yemen is something that really hurts, so badly. My heart bleeds. For the people of Yemen, literally starving, being bombed daily. Now, as we speak, Hodeidah is being bombed by Saudis, Israelis, American airplanes, and there's genocide happening in Yemen. Literally, thousands of people are dying, and the world is silent. Why? We don't know. It's after all, it's whatever we can do, we do. And nobody will stop us. This is the message that's sent to the world. And we really have to rethink our species' potential survival into the next century, if not this century, that if we keep on this process next. This didn't start yesterday, of course. We know that great powers do things on their interest without consideration of what the people want. For example, Balfour and Joe Cambone, when they issued their declaration in 1917, it wasn't because they loved Jews or they hated Palestinians or any such things. It was because of power politics. They wanted this for power politics.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.